Welcome to Beneath the Wing. Just like air passing over the wing of an aircraft provides lift, the people we meet can also give us lift in life by sharing their stories of strength and success, connecting us all. Beneath the Wing explores the stories of those connected with the Minnesota Air National Guard's 133rd Airlift Wing with a little humor and learning along the way. I'm your host, Wing Command Chief Mark Legvold. Welcome to our now annual Valentine's Day special edition of Beneath the Wing called Love in the Military, co-hosted with the love of my wife, my life. Here I'm off to a flying start. Lisa, thanks for joining me.
Oh, Mark, this is one of my favorite things I get to do as your spouse, but as your military spouse. Joining us today, we have Tech Sergeant Nick Baker of the 133rd Medical Group and his husband, Alex Thomas. Welcome.
Thank you.
Nick is a respiratory therapist. I know I'm saying it wrong, Nick, and you'll correct me in a second, both here at the Wing and for the Veterans Administration. And Alex is a principal chemist for Ecolab. Did I get that right?
Correct.
Fantastic. Cool thing. And they're newlyweds. So let's start with your story. How did you guys find each other? What's your love story?
We met on one of the many dating apps, Tinder or something of that nature. We met, we found common interests, and this was right at the start of COVID, just before all the COVID lockdowns happened. Thankfully, I had a piece of paper that said I was allowed to be out and about because I was medical, although I never got pulled over going to Alex's. But we met, we had dinner, and watched a movie the first night. Alex was amazed at how much gross amount of food I put away at one point in time. I felt bad because I just kept eating. And then shortly after we met, before our second date, I got sick, and I was sick for about a week. I don't know what I had. I don't know if it was COVID or not, but I couldn't even move off the couch. And Alex actually thought I was ghosting him. As it were, that, you know, I didn't want to see him again, and I was just slowly backing away, and then I was just going to ignore him. And, you know, 2.5 years later, that is not what happened. That is not what ended up happening. But, yeah, we clicked almost immediately when we started spending time together.
Yeah. Alex, what were the challenges during COVID for you?
For me, it was kind of I was used to going to the office every single day, 5 days a week. But then once lockdown happened, we were fully remote. I still did kind of some lab work as part of my job. So we went in because we were still considered essential as related to that. So I was in the lab at the beginning, probably like once a week, but then kind of moved on more and more. I spent more time at home. So I definitely lost a social aspect to my life because, I used to go out with friends and stuff on weekends, but then once COVID happened, that kind of stopped, and then I didn't see anybody at work because I wasn't in an office. So really the most social interaction I had was Nick on a frequent basis, and then with him kind of being medical too, there'd be times where, he would work 5 days in a row, and so I wouldn't see him, but we made it work, so.
Yeah. Not ghosting, just working and being
sick.
sick.
Yeah, not ghosting, working and being sick. It's 12 hours in the ICU day after day. I get home and I'd be like, I'm sorry, I've got to get up again at 5 o'clock in the morning. And at the time I was living in Oakdale and working at St. John's Hospital out in Maplewood, and Alex was living in Egan, so it wasn't necessarily a short drive to get down there, but I was like, I'm all COVID gross. I need to shower. I just want to go to bed. My next day off is whatever day. I'll come down after work that night and I'll, stay the night, and then, we can spend the day together tomorrow or whatever. So.
Yeah.
Did you guys figure out any unique ways to build that connection since you had a new relationship in the middle of a pandemic?
We found new TV shows to kind of binge watch together, stuff that we had enjoyed, and then whenever I had, I would occasionally bring my dog with me. And we'd take her for walks around, especially when it got warmer outside. So we did a lot of walking together. We drove up north at one point in time up to
Gooseberry?
we went up to Gooseberry Falls over that summer to do some hiking. kind of stuff like that, walk around the falls. We have a love and a share of nature and that kind of thing. So anything engaging to where we weren't necessarily, stuck inside if we didn't have to be.
Good way of getting out and being busy and keeping your mind off all the stuff that's going on in the world. Being a respiratory therapist during COVID, I'm sure, was a struggle.
It's very different. All hospitals have intubated patients. That means they have a breathing tube and they're on a ventilator. Respiratory therapists are a huge part of that. We help manage and run the ventilator while patients are doing that. Beforehand, you'd have patients that would be on ventilators for numerous reasons, and then eventually they would come off, and things would be, they'd get extubated, pull the tube out, they'd breathe on their own, things would be fine. COVID turned all of that on its head for a lot of us. There's one of the biggest challenges with COVID with me, especially at the VA and at my other hospital, was respiratory therapists are involved in what they call compassionate extubation, where a family decides to discontinue care of their loved one. So it's a respiratory therapist and a nurse that are in the room when a family decides this. We turn off the ventilator, we take the tube out, and we put it into God's hands at that point. That doesn't happen, it didn't before COVID happen terribly often. You'd get, a couple, 5-ish maybe a year. I can't tell you how many people are veterans actually that I extubated compassionately during that time. It got to the point where I reached out to our chaplain because I started to feel responsible, for these people dying. Because if not for me pulling the tube, they'd still be on the ventilator and still fighting.
Right.
I had never had to deal with that in that extreme as a respiratory therapist before, because I became an RT 2 years before COVID hit. So I was a baby RT, didn't really have to deal with stuff like that. I'd been to codes, I'd been to all that kind of stuff, but COVID hit me really hard in the resiliency type area of, I was even talking to Alex, I'm like, how do I not feel responsible? How do I do this? And I think the support that I received from Alex from that really helped to strengthen our bond even more.
Yeah.
As I transitioned through all of COVID.
It's hard when your spouse is aching emotionally. How did you approach Nick with a sense of empathy? I mean, you work at Ecolab and you're a brilliant man, and I guess how did he come home? How could you tell that he needed that type of emotional care, and how did you approach that?
Luckily we have a very open communication in our relationship. So, if he was struggling, he would just tell me. It wasn't a lot of trying to figure out how you're feeling type thing.
Yeah.
Because I think that's important in a healthy relationship. And a lot of time it's just listening more so than trying to give advice sometimes. And just kind of let them vent on what the issue is, and trying to get, obviously, I reinforce it's you didn't do that to them type thing.
Yeah.
And the more unfortunate part is when you would see people talk, COVID's fake, COVID's all this, and you don't see what people have to deal with on a daily basis in that scenario, healthcare. So that's probably the hard part of COVID for me. It was people trying to explain that to me, even people I knew that I thought I was close with, that good friends with, and all of a sudden you're you're very different than I thought you were.
Yeah.
Because it just shows a lack of empathy for people that are in that scenario. Nick was in that scenario, so a lot of it was just listening, understanding, and just kind of talking through it as it happened. And it wasn't all the time, but you could tell when there's a harder week than the week before type thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of the secret of all good relationships, isn't it? Listening and not necessarily solving all the problems, but being that soft place for one another. COVID just brought it all at once, it feels like. Yeah. It was the volume of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Alex, I have a question for you. So, you and I are the non-military people at the table, right? So, being a newly married military spouse, is there anything that surprised you? What's it been like?
Really, during the first couple of years, there wasn't much deployment or anything. But then there's a week we went to Alaska which was like the first time you were gone for a longer period of time, and then went to Japan. So like that was just different to not have them there every single day, especially since during COVID we were basically together every single day, like all the time. And so, and me like working from home, a lot of times like if he had a day off, I was still just home, like we were just still home together. So luckily I was able to talk to my sister-in-law, 'cause my brother's active duty military, and he used to go on deployments for 2-3 months at a time when they had kids and stuff like that. So I'm sure that was a lot more difficult than me just having a dog to deal with. But so just kind of talking to her and like how she kind of got through, and she says a lot of times just like in today's age it's a lot easier to communicate on a frequent basis when somebody's overseas. Like when you're in Japan, I mean, we basically talked all day. Like it wasn't really any different.
Yeah, we had a lot of, because of Japan's time frame, there's a lot of, I would be awake when he would go to bed, and thankfully Alex stays up late, and then I would be awake through the whole day, and then would be able to stay up late enough on my end for him to wake up in the morning, and then I would turn around and go to bed at night. So it worked out in just the right way to where we could say good morning and good night to each other. While I was in Japan, I took a manning assist over the summer, so I was in Japan for 5 weeks, flying with the active duty PACAF CCAT unit out of Kadena to fly critical care air transport patients.
That would be what CCAT stands
Yes,
for.
critical care air transport team, sorry.
What is PACAF?
The Pacific Air Forces.
Okay.
But I was out there with their active duty team. I got to fly a couple of patients, one out of mainland Japan and one out of Guam, to bring them back to Hawaii and San Diego hospitals respectively. So that was a lot of fun. A short need had come up. The dates for it changed numerous times, but I interviewed with I suppose the highest ups in CCAT on the guard side. I'm not sure how many people I interviewed against. I rushed a passport to get everything in and ready to go, and they said, never mind, active duty's going to hold on to it. And then 2 weeks later, they said, the dates have changed, we still need somebody, are you still interested? So I went through my chain of command and said, hey, is this okay, can I do this? And Colonel Nelson, who was our commander at the time, was like, heck yeah, go do it, represent. So I got to go and do that, and spoke with Alex with it, as it was happening. And he was on board, so it was nice to receive the support, because I was used to active duty deploying for 4 months at a time, every 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
And regardless of who my spouse was, it was, my military life unfortunately comes first. I signed up to serve, this is what I'm doing, especially on the active duty side, it was 24/7. I said I'm going out again, so it was all of my previous relationships, it was very much, are you emotionally stable and mature enough to handle me not being here for 4 months at a time. I will be in Afghanistan, I will be in a combat zone, I will not be able to talk to you every day, like, are you prepared for that? And in some instances it was, yes, I'm prepared, and then partway through the deployment, I guess I wasn't prepared, but Alex is very perfect for everything that I do with the military now. Everything is very supportive, is very, ready to go, like, I don't always understand what you're doing, but I get it, do your thing, which is huge.
What was that conversation? I want to kind of circle back on Lisa's question. That sounds like a real purposeful way of saying, hey, are you understanding? Are you willing to support? Are you mature enough to understand? Going into a relationship with a guy in the military, you had a little bit of experience just understanding, or a little understanding, but what were the big concerns that you approached in that conversations?
It's kind of a little bit more like what he did in the military specifically type thing, and having to learn more kind of like what he does in the military versus like active duty military and that kind of stuff. And like obviously the deployments are very different in those scenarios most of the time. So it was never like a concern or a red flag to me or anything like that.
Okay. All right. Okay, my turn to ask the next question. Nick, you talked a little bit about your time in active duty, and you grew up in Colorado, New Jersey.
Yep.
A little mix in between. Graduated high school in Colorado, though.
Yes.
So those are like oddball places in the world compared to right here in the middle of Minnesota, right?
Yes.
How did you find your way to Minnesota?
So I found my way to Minnesota on my last active duty deployment, which was deployment number 5 and trip number 8, I think, to the desert. I had applied actually to cross train, and I wanted to cross train into medical. At the time, the Air Force was doing voluntary separation pay, the VSP program, and they closed down all of the cross training into medical. So as a first term airman in the active duty, you are guaranteed to be able to cross train, or at least you were, 8 years ago, however long that was. You're guaranteed to be able to cross train regardless of what career field you're in. Occasionally, a critically manned career field can say, no, we need you here because we're critically manned, we don't have enough people. But I was first term, I was guaranteed to cross train, then all of the cross training shut down. I wanted to do medical or legal, so I then interviewed to be a paralegal. Long story short, got approved by MAGCOM, and then AFPC said no, and this happened while I was deployed on my last deployment.
So you're saying one big part of our bureaucratic organization said yes, and one big part of our bureaucratic organization said no.
And when the personnel center said no, it was the personnel center that was like, we have the decision on that. And it was because they were force shaping. And at that point, I got very jaded and very upset with active duty military, because I knew that my active duty military career field could land afterwards in like BAE or L3 or Raytheon, some kind of like tech neat type company like that. That's not where my passion was. I gave up a medical job in the military to fly because I thought that would be cooler. And my mom before me was a radio operator, an airborne radio operator in the Air Force in the 80s, which was really neat. So I kind of followed in her footsteps, unbeknownst to me at the time. But with all of that happening, I had said, do I want to do this anymore? I can't cross train. Am I going to be stuck here? I want to make a career out of it, but maybe it's time for me to say goodbye to the military. I met someone on that deployment. Things were going very well. I ended up submitting for voluntary separation. The Air Force paid me a decent amount of money to leave active duty military. I met all the qualifications, and the gentleman that I was in a relationship with at the time was actually here on the reserve side in the 934th. And I was like, well, I'm getting out of active duty. I lined up a job to teach ballroom dance here in Minnesota and left in 2014 and moved up here. And that relationship was good until it wasn't. And then 4 years later, that relationship didn't exist anymore, and I decided to stay up here. At that point, I was already back. I had already re-enlisted into the Guard and had been trained as an RT, so I figured, why not, I'll stay. We were living in Wisconsin, so I moved from the Wisconsin side to the Minnesota side, and I suppose the rest is history. But that's how I ended up in Minnesota from New Jersey and Colorado. was unfortunately a failed engagement, but everything is a learning experience, and I was brought here to do this, by whichever power for whatever reason, and if I could do it all over again, to the land where I am now, I would do the same things.
Obviously. And the winters are so fantastic, too.
Yeah, they're great.
Cool.
Wrong.
We're all agreeing. It's been a rough winter in Minnesota.
It's been rough, yes.
Believe me, adjusting to Minnesota from Tucson was very different. Very different.
Indeed.
Let's lighten things. So, what's the most pleasant thing about being married for you two so far?
It's weird because it feels the same as before being married, because we lived together for 2 years before we got married. It's really nice now to be able to say my husband, instead of my fiance. And sometimes I'm deliberately vague depending on the crowd that I keep with the whole gay thing. Not everybody is accepting, not everybody is up to speed. There's a lot going on kind of on that side of the fence that, even Alex and I don't necessarily agree with. The loudest voices get the most attention, and the loudest voices don't always speak for everybody as far as the LGBTQ plus community is concerned.
Isn't that true on so many things?
Yes. So with that, there was a little bit of safety in being able to say, "Oh, my fiance," because then well, nobody would know, is your fiance a man or a woman? But now I find a lot of pride in being able to say, oh, my husband does this, and no, my husband and I are going out later. So that has been, I think, the best part for me and the biggest change since being, married, other than, of course, the legal protection. If, God forbid, something happens to one of us, we don't have to fight the state for assets.
Yeah.
So as blank and blunt as that is, that's unfortunately the reality that we live in. So
It is a part of it, though.
Yeah, it is.
Alex, do you agree?
Yes, I agree. I think, I wasn't out to my family when I met Nick initially. So I don't remember how long it was, probably 6 months-ish.
Your mom, I remember meeting your mom for the first time.
Oh, my
the
mom
summer
did.
that we
I
started
forgot, yeah.
dating.
My mom did know.
Yeah.
And then I went to the rest of my family, I think, in October of that year.
Yeah.
And they were all very accepting of it. And then kind of socially is like going out to like larger groups. Like there's some friends that knew and didn't know. And then professionally, it kind of is depending on the relationship I have with those people. Because unfortunately, working in the field I do is a lot of farmers. And sometimes that's not the viewpoint that they share.
Oh.
So I try to keep my professional life very separate from my personal life when it comes to like that topic. So
You do work with a lot of farmers.
yeah.
And we like I said, you're a humble, decent guy, but you're brilliant. You have a patent. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you've designed?
Yeah. So I started Ecolab in 2014. I've been there about 8 years now, working in the same group. But over the last couple of years, we've been working on a new technology for udder care, using something called PFA, or it's called performic acid. Just basically uses a new sanitizer to the market. But working with one of our more brilliant chemists than I, who has a PhD, we were able to kind of work through and understand that if we added a certain ingredient, we could actually increase the shelf life of that product versus not having it there. And those ingredients have been used in those products for years, and nobody noticed the impact to it. And so we did, and so we ended up getting a patent granted for it, I think spring of last year.
Great.
So I didn't think that's what I'd do with my life, but that's what ended up happening. And I never thought I grew up, around horses and a ranch my entire life. My goal is to never go back to that, and then it just kind of ended up falling into it again.
Yeah.
And I ended up luckily having a really good supportive manager, and that's kind of what has kept me at Ecolab.
Great.
That is cool.
I'm going to reintroduce you guys, and we're going to take a short break. Lisa and I have been talking with Alex Thomas and Tech Sergeant Nick Baker of our 133rd Medical Group. We're going to take a brief commercial break. Please stick around and join us for our second section. Thanks for sticking around for the second half of our annual Valentine's Day special edition of Beneath the Wing. Lisa and I are joined by Tech Sergeant Nick Baker of the 133rd Medical Group and his husband Alex. Guys, thanks for sticking around.
Thank you.
All right. So we started down the road here in the first section. Nick, you served during Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Correct.
And I've often referred to that as the wrong step in the right direction when it comes to policy. What was it like being a gay man in the military during that time and when it was repealed?
So initially, I was very scared that somebody would find out. So I enlisted 3 years and some change before DADT was eventually repealed. And so I very quickly had to, thankfully I was single at the time, I very quickly had to learn how to almost separate everything. I have my military life and I have my personal life, and those two things are never allowed to come together, because if they do, because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I could potentially get in trouble. And I had friends, I had seen people that had gotten kicked out of some of the other services, and it was not, depending on the nature of it, it may not have been just a general discharge, it could have been a dishonorable discharge, which is very not good for you, later on in life, where things are concerned. So I had friends, as I grew in the military, I began to then have friends that knew but I wouldn't openly speak about it while at work for those reasons. We had someone that wanted to get out of the military. She ended up, I think she ended up coming out to the commander at the time, and instead of getting out of the military, she lost a stripe and then was ineligible for promotion. And, you know, that I think was more devastating than what she wanted to do. But so pre-repeal, it was very compartmentalized. I have these friends, and of course, we always found a way to kind of gravitate towards each other. So, you know, there were a few of us within the wing that were, and like those of us on base that were before DADT, and that then became like my military social group, you know, because somehow or another we ran into each other, you know, downtown in Tucson, or we'd go out in Phoenix, you know, to get away from anybody that we may see in Tucson, you know, just to kind of protect ourselves. You know, and so we would find each other, and then we had our own kind of little groups, and it was a good way to have, you know, support and that kind of thing. Post DADT, I didn't run, you know, I say I didn't run through the halls, but I didn't openly announce that, you know, like it wasn't a ha gotcha type moment for me. It was okay, cool, now I can openly talk about, you know, whoever I'm dating, or I can openly be myself, or, you know, I don't have to always switch the pronouns, because one of the conversations you have when you're deployed is very much, you know, you talk about your spouse, you talk about, you know, they talk about their wives and their girlfriends and their kids and all these things, and I always had to change he to she, or use they, or, you know, be very non-committal into a gender type thing, you know, to, you know, change the name from whatever it was to, you know, a female name. And I don't know if it was a good thing or not, but I got very good at it. So, but after that, to be able to just take a breath and go, I don't have to feel like I'm not able to be myself anymore. I can bring, you know, my personal life to an extent, and my professional military career, you know, I can do that together. I can go to, you know, some of these, you know, group gatherings that people are having, and I can bring my spouse with me, because before, you know, the annual holiday party and all this other stuff, like I couldn't bring my boyfriend at the time with me to the annual Christmas party for that, because they'd go, well, who is that, you know, and I couldn't just pass him off as a friend.
Yeah.
So, but nothing, I don't know the right word to use. Nothing in the way that I carried myself or in the way that I did business changed. I was still who I was. I was still flying on the same aircraft. I was still flying the same missions. I was still deploying with the same crews. I just didn't have to always be looking over my shoulder anytime that I was texting my significant other or anything like that. So It was very much more room to breathe kind of thing. And surprisingly, most people didn't care. I always thought it would be this big deal and everybody would be, you know, very against me, or I would get shunned or treated differently, and, you know, 99 times out of 100 that wasn't the case. It wasn't a detail that mattered when it came to the mission and what we were here to do.
The idea of talking about resiliency in people. Do you feel like the experience, and it pains me that we had airmen that were serving in the military, soldiers, sailors, Marines. We didn't have Guardians yet, but we had people serving in the military that couldn't be 100% who they are 100% of the time because of who they loved. Is it easier, and are you a more resilient person now, having gone through that, and easier to serve? Do you feel like your ability to do your job is better because you're more, I don't know if the word is balanced or not. Nick, tell me if I'm saying that wrong.
I think I understand what you mean. It is easier to be cohesive with my unit when I can be myself 100%. I don't have to hold back a part of me to be cohesive with my unit. Active duty, I suppose it was kind of the same way, because your personal life shouldn't weigh in, you know, when you're flying outside the wire, that kind of thing. So you should have no problem being cohesive. But it was before DADT, the repeal of, it was harder to be a cohesive member of my unit, because I felt like I couldn't be part of certain conversations, or I couldn't hang out with those people. For my first 3 years of the military, I almost never hung out with another military member when I wasn't at work. I very much had my own complete separate thing. So it was very difficult to, you know, oh, what are your plans this weekend? Oh, I'm going to sit at home, because you can't be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to Phoenix and, you know, go country dancing at the gay bar. you know, and then if you say I'm going to go to Phoenix and country dancing, you just might get that person that goes, let me come with you. And I'm like, not unless a lot of people get real cool about a lot of stuff real quickly. So no, please don't. So it's much easier now because, you know, obviously, you know, this unit knows there were plenty of people from our unit that were at mine and Alex's wedding. Ask Major Lenning about the pyramid.
We'll have
Later
to.
on.
She's been on the podcast already
has.
once, so
Yep.
too late.
Yeah.
Can't ask her on this.
Yeah. So, but yeah, the ability to be, you know, to be cohesive and to connect on more than just this is my job and my duty level is what I have now as compared to then.
Yeah. So talking about that cohesive lifestyle, it's a great way of describing that, and I feel like I have a better understanding of where you're coming from. Alex, you mentioned in the first segment about coming out and what that was like. Do you mind sharing your story of
Yeah.
how that came about in your family, because it was later in life than
Yep.
Nick?
Yeah, I was only out to a handful of people when I first met Nick. One of those people being my mom, and then some other closer friends. To me, I never really felt, I guess, the need to. Like, it wasn't really compelling to me. I was kind of like, I'm just living my life. I'm just going to do the way I want to. I don't have to share with everybody. But then as Nick and I started getting closer, I kind of realized that there was more there. And I realized to make it more healthy for the both of us was to come out to at least my family. I grew up in a family that was pretty conservative growing up, you know, Catholic. And so I was a little I wasn't really worried about one of my brothers, my sister, and my mom, because they were a little more open. My oldest brother and my dad were a little more conservative. So it was a little more of a concern there. But once I did, they were all very accepting of it. Really nothing negative came out of it. But yeah, so that's kind of basically, I just knew there, in order to make this stronger and healthier, I had to kind of be more forthcoming to my family about my lifestyle.
You feel like you have that level of internal cohesivity, a little bit more in balance, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it allows us, you know, to be able to do everything together now and things like that.
I would think that would be potentially a real significant barrier to a good long-term relationship, to have any kind of walls like that constructed, but especially constructed from the outside to you rather than, you know.
Another thing, you realize that there, unfortunately, walls that are still there for some other reasons on your professional side, because, you know, there's rules against retaliation and stuff like that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can say somebody started treating you different because they found out. Like, you can't really hold that up against anybody. So I still am pretty selective at work of like who I tell and don't tell. A lot of times it's just people always tell me I'm very private. It's just because I am naturally introverted, so I'm just not going to go tell everybody about my life and what I did all weekend. So it really hasn't been that hard for me on the professional side of things to try to, I guess, I don't know, control it. I don't know what the correct word is. But I don't really get asked about it that much because I don't tell anybody anything.
No, your work is it's very easy for your work to just be your work, because, you know, your work friends that you don't work with in the same department, but any of the ones that we hang out with, they were either at our wedding, so obviously they know, and we've been to a couple of their weddings now as a couple, which was a lot of fun. So the people that matter at his work know and don't care, and then the other people where it's not pertinent information, you know, and that's fine, and it's really easy because he can work from home, you know, so it's not like he has to put on a mask, as it were, you know, with other people at work. But you know, as far as the family stuff goes, Alex and I very much enjoy like hosting and having people over and kind of doing that thing. You know, like hosting Christmas or hosting Thanksgiving, and without him being out to his family, it would have been fairly impossible to do to do things like that. But it wasn't an important deciding factor in our relationship from my standpoint, because I knew that it wasn't a decision that I could force him into, and it wasn't my place to kind of adjust his family dynamic. So my role in all of that was, what do you need me to do? You know, I mean, he was shaking, waiting for text messages to come back after he after he sent it. And he sent it when I wasn't home. I got back from work one day. He's like, so I sent a text to my family. And I was like, oh, how'd it go? He's like, I don't know. Nobody's replied. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I'll make dinner. Let's do something else while we wait.
So at that time, my brother, military, they were in, I think, Virginia at that point. And then my other brother was in Omaha medical school. And my sister was here, and then my parents are separated, but they both are from here. So it's a lot easier just to do it that way and not, there would be no way to do it in person in a reasonable way. So, yeah, it, to me, it was one of those things where, my mom was like, wow, like I kind of always knew type thing. But she's like, it's not my place to say it. So it's one of those things where she was very accepting at the beginning, and then she knew the entire time we were together, but like we didn't have.
Yeah, I remember lunch. The first time I met your mom was at lunch, and she was 20 minutes late, as you said she would be, to get to lunch. So, but it was a good time. So Alex's family has been very accepting and supportive of me, and in the best way they can. We don't interact with their family constantly. I think now in town is only your mom, your sister, and your dad, because the middle brother is up in Duluth, and then the oldest brother is active duty out in the Virginia area doing stuff out there. But anytime we get together with gatherings, it's very nice that I am referred to as Uncle Nick to the nieces and nephews that I'm inheriting on Alex's side. So that's really cool for me, because I didn't think that would be something that came so immediately and abruptly, because all my nieces and nephews are 8 or less, aside from one of them who's 9 now, I think. So they're all 9 years and younger. So I figured that might be this is Alex's roommate or something, until we got to a little bit later on, kind of in life. But it's nice because we don't have to be any different than we are now as the kids grow up. So
yeah,
those littles are growing up understanding that love is love.
Yes.
It's pretty good. Yeah. So I would love to ask you guys to each share the thing that you admire most about the other.
Go first.
Alex, you looked right over at him away.
I think the thing that I've always admired most about Nick was kind of like his drive and ambition for things that he does. For like kind of his background growing up, he's made it a very long way, and a lot of it's self-driven. And I think that's really important, that people have that quality in them, that they're not dependent on somebody else to make sure that they're happy, that type of thing. And being able to, if they have a goal, they can achieve it by just putting in the hard work to do it. So that's what I've found the connection with you.
Nick.
For me, I've always admired Alex's fierce sense of independence, which is fantastic. I've been in relationships where it's felt like the other person is codependent on me, and I'm responsible for their happiness at all times. And I really like that Alex he's very much, he's intelligent. We can have good, meaningful conversations. And he's fiercely independent, and then he's also very successful in everything that he's done. He's got the patent. He's working his way up the ladder at Ecolab. He's very driven for all of that, and so I appreciate that we can both share being the breadwinner, as it were. Like none of us feels financially responsible for the other. Everything is a joint effort, and we both contribute equally to our house, our bills, our dog. Everything can be ours, and there's no feeling of this is mine and this is yours. Like everything that we have, it is an our thing, as we move through our journey together. So it's very different and very refreshing, and it does feel like a true partnership.
Yeah. So nice to have those words of affirmation. Is one of those love languages that. Is it?
Yeah.
All right. It goes so far, especially if that's the primary one. That's great. You ready to play?
Sure.
Okay. We're going to play a game called Would You Rather. Usually I do a quick question in these podcasts, but for the sake of having a couple on, we play Would You Rather. Mm-hmm. So I'll start.
Okay.
if that's okay with you, my dear. And Nick, you get to answer first, and then Alex, you get to answer second. Would you rather shovel snow or mow the lawn?
Not do either.
Shovel snow.
Really? Alex?
I do both of them most of the time.
Fair enough. Lisa?
Would you rather dance or sing?
Oh, for me, it's dance,
I reminded me saying.
and Alex is sing.
Mm-hmm.
I got a little background, so I knew the answers to that one already. See Paramore in concert or Taylor Swift if you can get tickets.
Paramore.
If you were in Arizona in a couple months, you'd actually get to see them both in concert together. But
Oh, really?
yeah,
I'd probably see Taylor Swift over Paramore at this point.
all right.
Do you work to live or live to work?
Ooh.
Sorry, I didn't mean for that to be hard.
I work to live.
I think I also, I don't know. I love what I do. I really do. I love what I do in the hospital. I'm very, very passionate about being an RT and doing the healthcare thing that I do. I mean, I've had my other RT friends joke that if you can picture the scene in Mrs. Doubtfire when Stu starts choking and Robin Williams comes running, help is on the way, dear, and like vaults a wall. That's me running to codes.
Yeah.
So I think I live to work in that aspect.
Fair enough. Laugh with each other or have deep conversations.
I would say laugh with each other.
Yeah.
Would you rather have more time or more money?
Good time.
I would also say time.
Would you rather cook or do dishes?
Ugh, I do the dishes. And Alex
I cook,
cooks.
yeah.
Fair enough. That works for a lot.
When you watch a movie, would you prefer to have a movie make you scream, cry, or laugh?
Mine is Scream.
I'd probably say laugh.
Okay.
Even though we watch a lot of scary movies together.
Paint a room or vacuum the entire house.
Paint a room.
I'd rather vacuum.
Boy, does that work. Lisa, last one.
Read a book, listen to music, or watch a favorite show.
Mine is read a book.
Maybe watch a favorite show.
Hang on.
All right.
Alex, what's the best thing about being married to someone in the military?
I think part of it comes from a personality of like organization kind of driven. I think a lot of that is instilled in you when you kind of join the military.
Yeah.
I think that
I would
is
say
the
so,
benefit
yeah.
of it.
I had no direction when I joined at 18, and it very much gave me a sense of purpose and like self-sufficientism. So the military taught me a lot that I probably would not have learned otherwise.
Fair enough.
Is this our wrap-up question?
Yep.
Mark? All right. I think for both of you, each independently answer. Any advice for non-military partners who might just not get the requirements of military life?
You can go first.
Why am I going first? You're the non-military partner. Advice I would give, and for someone that's just not getting the military component of it, is to always have an open mind and understand that people that want to serve in the military, probably 9 times out of 10, everybody is serving a purpose greater than themselves. But I think a lot of people join the military because of that facet of it. Yes, there's education benefits. Yes, if you're active duty, it's a guaranteed job and a guaranteed paycheck and, all that other stuff behind it. But it's understanding that a lot of people in the military see what they're doing and as serving a higher purpose than just serving themselves. It's, we have members in the wing, it's not just about the money or it's not about this, it's about, it's about the experience and the call to duty, as it were. So just to try to be understanding that, your spouse feels a calling for something greater than themselves and their answer to that was the military.
Yeah, I think just kind of double on that, but then it's also like it shows a sense of like selflessness of that person to kind of be able to just serve their country willingly. First of all, I mean, you willingly join it. It's not like you're forced into it. Although I have to argue with Nick sometimes. I think it'd be helpful sometimes if people are required to do service for like 2-3 years of their life. But I think it'd make patriotism a real thing. But yeah, I think it's understanding that the amount of sacrifice they give to basically help the country and support the country.
Thanks for supporting him while he supports the country.
Of course.
Our military spouses just don't get the credit that they deserve half the time for the sacrifices that you all get to go through too. Thanks, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Guys, thanks for joining us on Beneath the Wing. Alex, Nick, it has been a pleasure.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will have another episode featuring another newlywed couple for our next episode. So I hope you join Lisa and I as we host the next episode of Beneath the Wing. And just preemptively, congratulations, Nick, on your upcoming promotion out here at the Wing.
Thanks, sir.
All right, great to have you both on.
Thank you.